Hello children, today we are going to study English literature, lesson 11, The Selfish Giant. So let us begin. Every afternoon the children used to go and play in the giant's garden because he had gone away somewhere. It was a lovely garden with soft green grass. There were beautiful flowers that looked like stars. There were also the peach trees that bore juicy fruits. The birds sang so sweetly that the children used to stop their games to listen to the songs of the birds. "How happy we are here," they said to each other. One day, the giant came back. He saw the children playing in the garden. "What are you doing here? This is my garden," he shouted in a very gruff voice. The children ran away. He was a very selfish giant. He built a high wall around his garden and put up a notice on the wall. "Children not allowed. Those who come in will be punished." The children had nowhere to play now. They talked about the beautiful garden inside. How happy we were there, they said to each other. Then spring came. There were flowers and little birds everywhere. But it was still winter in the selfish giant's garden. The birds did not sing in it, as there were no children. The trees forgot to blossom. One beautiful flower put its head out from the grass. It read the notice and felt very sorry for the children. It slipped back into the ground and went off to sleep. "I cannot understand why spring is so late in coming," said the selfish giant. "I hope the weather will change." But spring never came, nor did summer. It was always winter in sight. Autumn gave golden fruits to every garden, but not to the selfish giant's garden. Children, this is the story of a selfish giant who never allowed the children to play in his garden. Something happened in the garden which made the angry giant cool, and he became a good friend of the children. Now children, let us understand the first page. Daily in the afternoon, little children used to go and play in a giant's garden because the giant had gone somewhere out. The garden was very beautiful. It had soft green grass and beautiful flowers that looked like stars. In the garden, there were peach trees that gave juicy fruits. The atmosphere of the garden was very beautiful, calm, and heavenly. Birds used to sing in the garden so sweetly that the children used to stop their games to listen to the songs of the birds. Children often used to talk to each other, saying that they feel so happy in coming and playing in the garden. One day, while the children were playing in the garden, the giant came back. On seeing the children playing in the garden, the giant shouted in anger, "What are you all doing here in my garden?" On hearing this, the children got frightened and ran away from there. He was a selfish giant and did not want any children to come in his garden. So he had built a high wall all around there and put up a notice on the wall, "Children not allowed. Those who come in will be punished." The poor children had no other place to play now. They wandered round the high wall of the garden and talked to each other about the beautiful garden. They often talked about the happiness they used to get in the garden. Now the spring season came, and all over the city there were flowers and little birds. But in the selfish giant's garden, it was still winter, as nothing had changed. The birds did not come to sing in it, as there were no children, and it seemed as if the trees forgot to bloom. One day, a beautiful flower put its head out from the grass and read the notice which was on the wall, that children are not allowed, and felt very sad for the children. So the flower went back into the ground and went off to sleep. Now there was not a single new flower in the garden. The selfish giant said to himself, "I can't understand why isn't spring coming soon?" Then he pleases himself by thinking that, "I hope the weather changes into spring season." Time passed by, but it was still winter in the garden. The giant did not experience the spring or summer season, though the autumn season had given golden fruits to other garden, but not in his garden. Now children, let us read the second page. One morning, the giant was in bed when he heard some lovely music. It sounded so sweet to his ears that he thought it must be the king's musician passing by. It was only a little linnet singing outside his window. It was the most beautiful music in the world. "I believe spring has come at last," said the giant, and he jumped out of the bed and looked out. What did he see? He saw the most wonderful sight. Through a little hole in the wall, the children had crept in, and they were sitting on the branches of the trees. The trees were so glad to see the children that they had blossomed. The birds were flying about and twittering with delight. The flowers were looking up through the green grass. Only in one corner of the garden it was still winter. In that corner stood a little boy. He was so small that he could not reach up to the branches of the tree. He was crying. The poor tree was still quite covered with frost and snow. "Climb up, little boy," said the tree, but the boy was too tiny. The giant saw this. "How selfish I have been," he said. "Now I know why spring would not come here. I will put that poor little boy on top of the tree. Then I will pull down the wall, and my garden shall be the children's playground forever and ever. Children, let us understand. One morning, the giant woke up when he heard some lovely music. Thinking that the king's musicians are passing the way, he looked out. But it was a little bird singing outside his window, and it was the most beautiful music which he had ever heard. Hoping that spring had come at last, the giant jumped out of his bed and started looking out. Now, children, what did the giant see? There he saw the most beautiful sight through a hole in the wall. The children had come inside the garden and they were sitting on the tree branches. The presence of the children had made the trees so glad that they had covered themselves with fresh blossoms. The birds were also happy and flying and chirping with delight, and the flowers were looking up through the green grass and laughing. It was a lovely scene. The atmosphere of the garden was completely changed, and now there was joy and delight in the garden. There was still a corner in the garden where it was still winter, and in that corner a little boy was standing. He was so small that he could not reach to the branches of the tree. So he was crying, and the tree was covered with snow. The tree was encouraging the little boy to climb on the branch, but he was too small. As the giant saw this, his heart melted. How selfish I have been, he said to himself. I understand why spring was not coming here. I will put the poor little boy on top of the tree, and then I will knock down the wall, and my garden will be the children's playground forever. Now I will never stop the children from coming inside the garden, thinks the big giant. Children, let us read. He was really very sorry for what he had done. So he went out into the garden. But when the children saw him, they were so frightened that they all ran away, and winter came back to the garden. Only the little boy did not run, for his eyes were so full of tears that he did not see the giant coming. The giant took him gently in his hand and put him up onto the tree. And the tree blossomed, and the birds came and sang on it. The little boy put his arms around the giant's neck and kissed him. The other children saw that the giant was not wicked any longer. The children came running back, and with them came spring. It is your garden now, little children, said the giant, and he took a great axe and knocked down the wall. Since then, the giant plays with the children in the most beautiful garden every day. Children, let us understand from this paragraph. He was very sad for what he had done. So he crept downstairs and opened the front door quite softly and went into the garden. But as the children saw the giant, they became so frightened that they all ran away, and the garden became winter again. Now again there were no flowers, no birds, no happiness in the garden. Only the little boy could not run because his eyes were full of tears, and so he could not see the giant coming. The giant gently picked him up and made him sit on the tree. As the small boy sat on the tree, they again blossomed and the birds started chirping with delight. The little boy became so happy that he stretched out his arms around the giant's neck and kissed him. When the other children saw that the giant was not wicked any longer, they came back running, and with them came the spring. "It is your own garden now, little children," said the giant, and then he took a great axe and knocked down the wall. Since then, the giant played with the children in the most beautiful garden every day. So I hope, children, you all must have understood the lesson. Do revise it at home. Thank you and God bless you all.